We always are pleased to welcome Barbara McQuade, former actual professor of law, former U.S. attorney, MSNBC legal analyst, of course. Barbara McQuade, good morning.
Good morning, Stephanie.
Thanks so much for taking time with us as usual.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about this morning. So the House Judiciary is investigating the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. Just give us your take on this, because I keep saying, Barbara, I am not a conspiratorial person, but this really just buggers the imagination, doesn't it, that this was allowed to happen?
It is. It's it's so predictable when you have someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who attempted, it appears, to kill himself just 3 weeks earlier, that he wouldn't be on suicide watch, and also the nature of the charges against him. And also that very day, there had been a release of documents that likely caused stress in his life. When people are in prisons, they are often on and off suicide watch. But one of the things that will put someone on suicide watch is having a bad day in court. It might just last for a day, but the release of documents on that Friday would suggest to me a day that putting him back on suicide watch in light of his history might have been appropriate. The Bureau of Prisons protocol requires that before you take someone off of suicide watch, you have to meet with the program manager, who is a psychologist. And so we don't know whether that happened. I'm sure there'll be an investigation to see if it did. And if it didn't, why not? And is that adequate? Are the protocols adequate to protect someone like Jeffrey?
Barbara, my best friend of 40 years from college even was, she's a psychologist, but she was a psychologist in the segregated unit of men's maximum security prison out here in California. The first one was where Charlie Manson was, and then she was at Corcoran, and then I can't remember another one. But I mean, she said the same thing that most everyone I know said that has any knowledge of it. This is highly irregular. This just does not happen. I mean, and I think, as you say, the fact that the president of the United States was implicated in this stuff, right? On a flight, he was on flight logs on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. The one of these girls obviously worked at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it just, I guess at this point, how could you not feel a little conspiratorial, right? That within hours, Jeffrey Epstein is found dead. And I think, unfortunately, it's having Bill Barr, who lied about what was in the Mueller report, right? And us feeling like we don't have an attorney general or a Department of Justice that anybody trusts. So what?
Yeah, that's one of the damages of when people lose credibility, is that when you need them to be there and explain what happened, people don't trust what's going on, and it creates a vacuum for these kinds of conspiracy theories. I was at least gratified by the words of Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, when he said that the investigation will continue. Of course, the case ends, and when a defendant dies, the case is dismissed. But he said, don't forget, it included a conspiracy count, and it alleged that employees and associates were also involved in the sex trafficking with Jeffrey Epstein. And so, for those powerful and wealthy men who've been associated with him, to the extent they were involved in sex trafficking, and the statute makes it a crime not just to procure the girls, but to patronize them. So anyone who was engaging in commercial sex acts with underage girls is susceptible to conspiracy charges.
Well, yeah, I read that tweet of yours, Barbara, but Jody, were you saying something that sounded, I can't remember.
Bill Barr said that he's just going after the people that procured the girls, not necessarily the people that utilized the girls.
Well, Barbara, what this reminds me of is the ICE raid that you tweeted about, unusual to charge workers but not employers in worksite cases. We always focused on those who were profiting and cheating competitors by hiring undocumented workers. But does that concern you, from what Jody just said, that it sounds like this is the problem? You think, of course, if Donald Trump is implicated in any way, we're never going to know about it. I mean, is there any other way for this information to come out?
Well, one way is through civil lawsuits. So some of the girls have already sued. Some have vowed that they will sue, especially now that there's not a criminal case where they could have held Jeffrey Epstein accountable and perhaps obtained restitution for their psychological treatment. Now they're left to civil lawsuits, and maybe that's where we'll get to the bottom of it, because that will be run by independent private attorneys as opposed to the Justice Department. And so they'll have the ability to conduct investigations, obtain documents, and ask questions, ultimately have a trial if they aren't able to reach a settlement. And so perhaps through that process, they can identify some of the other perpetrators.
So you were asked how much information about Epstein and his co-conspirators will never be known because the criminal case against him closes with his death. And you said, unfortunately, it could be quite a bit. His case, no doubt, will be dismissed. But you say, I do think it's likely investigators will continue to investigate co-conspirators, as you mentioned. Um, and you say, unfortunately, that may never pan out into any charges for lots of reasons, right? Lack of evidence that's unavailable because you needed Epstein. So what do you think? I mean, it's hard to guess legally, right? What they have and what they don't.
Yeah, but you're right that they've lost a very important source of information. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein himself, because he's facing considerable prison time, wasn't likely to get a sweetheart deal and a walk, but he had some ability to negotiate for some benefit in exchange for providing information. He's the one who knows the most. He's the one who was at the center of the crimes, and he could tell investigators who else was involved, who facilitated and who patronized some of these girls. The other potential cooperator is also a little bit of a challenge. Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime girlfriend, madam, whatever it is you want to call her. She's in the UK or she's overseas, I guess is the speculation. That depending on where she is,
right,
there may be the ability to get information from her. She could be charged with crimes, but if she's not here in the United States, it makes it much harder to get your hands on her to try to obtain cooperation. But, the depositions that were released last Friday identified other people, butlers and servants and other kinds of people, pilots, who are around who I think face enough potential criminal exposure that they could have an incentive to be cooperative. And so there is, some hope for some information, but certainly not all of the information that would have been available if Jeffrey Epstein were still alive.
Barbara, what about the tape? So they raided his New York mansion and then this island that they refer to as Pedophilia Island. And I know you said I think a search warrant was already executed at his home, so investigators likely already have some of that. Again, I hate to say this, Barbara, but it does not inspire confidence in me if Bill Barr has control of the evidence.
No, I agree. And even his performance following the Epstein death, I find shows a just glaring lack of leadership that is reflected in the same way that President Trump speaks, which is, I'm appalled. We're going to get to the bottom of this. He's on the hook. He's responsible. He's the boss. The Bureau of Prisons is part of the Department of Justice, and so I found it disappointing that he didn't, what leaders do, accept responsibility, say you're sorry, and explain what you're going to do to address the problem. He failed to do those things. But,
But I do
have confidence in the investigators in New York,
who
seem to be investigating as aggressively as they can, including conducting a search on that island home, no doubt in an effort to raise family members who might have an incentive to get down there and clean up whatever's there. And so I think they're probably looking to see if there's any evidence there of conspirators.
Barbara, I was going to get your take on that. Tim Hogan tweeted, Barr was responsible. If he doesn't appoint a special counsel, his impeachment should go to the House Judiciary. I mean, the House Judiciary is already obviously investigating this, but I mean, we already have, I don't know how many grounds for impeachment, but this certainly, I mean, but again, this is talking about Barr, but I do think his performance, particularly in the Mueller probe, has already left people just with no confidence in his leadership. How should they deal with this?
Well, I think a House investigation is appropriate since we've lost confidence in William Barr, but it sounds like from early reports that there were some very serious staffing problems at this prison, and that it's not the only prison with these issues, that they had too few workers, that they were working mandatory overtime shifts, that they had people who were secretaries and had other types of jobs in the prison who were pressed into service for corrections work that they weren't qualified or trained to do. If that's the case, that's part of his organization, and if it's that dysfunctional, then maybe he should be held accountable for that.
Right. Well, I believe your answer, this is the latest interview you did, Barbara, you said it's the Bureau of Prisons which takes care of inmates and detainees. Somebody makes a decision on whether or not an inmate goes on suicide watch. It's hard to imagine why he wouldn't still have been on suicide watch. I mean, that is the most suspicious thing, isn't it? And I don't know what is on the record or not, but I thought I had read some reporting that he told guards that someone tried to kill him, that was not a suicide attempt, the last one. I mean, I just wonder if we're ever going to know the whole story here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, one thing that is disturbing about the prior either attack or suicide attempt, whatever it was, is that people who harm children, child molesters, do not do well in prison. There is
Yeah.
some honor among thieves, and so when one reason he was kept in the special housing unit was to prevent him from having interaction with other inmates. And so if someone had access to him to harm him, that's a problem as well. And so I think that a lot of scrutiny needs to be done. And, I also think that this is perhaps an opportunity for the public to get a window into what goes on in prisons. I don't think Jeffrey Epstein is the only person to attempt suicide in prison. It's actually a disturbingly common problem. And so if this causes us to take a more careful look at how we do corrections in America,
Yeah.
I think that's not a bad thing.
Well, but if any...
Politicians often talk about we need to lock people up, but if you're going to lock people up, you need to provide the resources to do it adequately.
Oh, no, agreed. But I just think it's if anybody, I mean, he had to be the most high-profile inmate in the country, right? With all this information about all of these powerful people, including the president of the United States, that was at the highest risk, I would think, for suicide or homicide. For this to have happened, I think is just jaw-dropping to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I did note that in addition to the Inspector General, who would be investigating for whether protocols were followed, whether protocols are appropriate, the FBI is also investigating. And the FBI investigates crimes. So that is very interesting to determine whether, it may not be based on anything other than the kind of speculation you and I are sharing right now.
Right.
But was there foul play? Was this a fellow inmate? Was this a prison guard? Did someone turn their back and allow it to happen? Was this a deprivation of civil rights? And so the FBI, I still have faith in their independence. So they apparently don't have cameras in the cells for the privacy.
I just was going to ask you, because I know Preet Bharara tweeted right when this happened, there should be tape. Are they trying to tell us there was a malfunction?
I think so. Again, I don't know all the facts, and it's still kind of coming out in dribs and drabs. I think that they have cameras in all the hallways and on all the doors, not in the cells themselves to permit privacy of the inmates. And so I think we'll at least be able to know whether the guards were, the frequency of their watch and whether anyone went inside. And so there will be tapes to help explain those things, but I don't know that there's going to be a tape of the act of his death.
Wow. So, Barbara, quickly before we go, because I know we've covered so much, but you tweeted, it's about time in terms of the impeachment. You said the House seems to be slow walking its inquiry. Is it just running out the clock until the election? Regardless of political considerations, it seems important to defend Congress's institutional mission by enforcing compliance with subpoenas. Again, I've seen some divergence in legal experts as to whether they've done this exactly the right way, or whether it's certainly, to those of us lay people, it feels like slow walking because we're like,
Yeah, since I tweeted that, I did have I sent another tweet that said I stand corrected, only because I participated in a conference call on the day the House Judiciary Committee filed its lawsuit to compel Don McGahn to appear and enforce the subpoena. And one of the things I asked that question: why is it taking so long? You subpoenaed him in April. Let's go. Months are running by. You're running out of time. And the answer was, felt that we were legally required to go through the negotiation and accommodation process.
Right.
We have done everything we can to ensure voluntary compliance, and upon exhausting that, we have filed a lawsuit. And so they thought that was an important part. I gave them about 90 days to try to work that out, and weren't able to do it, and so only then did they file a lawsuit. So they thought that was a required part that also demonstrated their good faith in trying to comply. Voluntary.
So it strengthens their hand in court to show that they tried to accommodate. Yeah,
it does. It does. And so they seem to mean business. They have been pretty aggressive in the last few days about making this an impeachment inquiry. And so I don't know that the whole House is on board with that. I don't think Nancy Pelosi is there yet, but I think at least the Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee are full bore on an impeachment inquiry.
Yep. I am, listen, impeachment is Disneyland to me, and I'm the kid in the back seat. So I will just keep pestering all of my legal ladies until I get the answer I want.
There yet, Rob?
Former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade, what a thrill. It's always an honor and a thrill to talk to you during these perilous legal times. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.